So again, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. And today we'll be talking about AI prompts. And so specifically, I want to kind of introduce you to some techniques that you can apply when you're interacting with your own AI that can get you quality AI responses. My name is Harry Sun, and I am a PhD student at Claremont Graduate University, majoring in psychology. And today I'm working this webinar with CGU's Cafe Center. And so in Cafe, we'll host different webinars throughout the semester. And if you're interested in checking out more webinars, please feel free to go to the website um, and to see more webinars or to view some past webinars. So to get us started, I would like to invite everyone to think about a question. The question is why AI prompts matter, or does it matter at all? And so I'm going to show you one example here from my earlier interaction with ChatGPT. Here is two screenshots of this conversation I had with ChatGPT, where I asked the question, right? It's a very simple prompt, explain flow theory. So flow theory is something I study here at CGU. It's just, you don't need to know what it means, but you can just know it is a psychological concept. It's actually developed by one of the professors that used to work here at CGU. And so you can see the output again, right? So first it's saying a very general description of what flow theory is, and then the ChatGPT went on to explain what is flow theory, right? Giving some bullet points and giving some more examples. And then it went on to explain some core conditions of flow. Okay, so a little bit more depth of what a construct is, and then some of the characteristics of flow state, and then why flow matters. And it ends with like a very simple formula of how to think about flow, right? So, but for me personally, as someone who study flow, I don't really like the response, and for several reasons. First of all, it is super long that I did not expect it to be so long that I need to take two screenshots. Part of it is because it's using all these bullet points that you're seeing here that's taking a lot of space. And second of all, it's not really what I need. It is providing, okay, the definition, the conditions, the characteristics, and why it matters, but it doesn't feel like there's a focus, like who is this for? I don't really get a sense from just looking at this response. So I tried to make it better by changing the prompt a little bit. Okay, what I did is instead I asked, explain flow theory to high school students in 200 words. Include one applied classroom example. And I'll give everyone a minute to read through the response and think about how is it different from the previous response I get. Okay, so the first thing I noticed in this response is much shorter. It's much more condensed. It does not have the bullet points. Instead, it has 4 short paragraphs. In terms of the content, it's still giving some definition of flow, and in the first and second paragraph, and it also include an example of a student working on a math problem in class to kind of explain what flow is and how does it look like in real life. And I'm sure as many of us who has studied math or has been working on problem in school can find that example somewhat relatable. And third of all is also using a language where it is set to be at a certain reading level that can be read for anyone who had been um, in the high school. And and all of that is because I slightly changed what I asked and what things I want to see in the prompt I designed. But then for me personally, I still find this response a little lacking something that I want. So I changed the prompt even further. And so this is the third example. And this time I asked ChatGPT to explain flow theory to psychology graduate student in 300 words, include a brief history and distinguish flow and concentration clearly. So again, I'll give you a minute or so to read through this and again, think about how is it different from the previous two response. Okay, so what I see from this response, again, first of all, in terms of the length, is more concise, but it has generally a lot of content. And second, it stands out to me immediately that this response sounds much more academic. It has more, what do you call it, like maybe more academic vocabularies. It's using sentence structure that are more complex. It sounds like seems like you're reading a journal article, whereas the previous two response sounds like you're reading something from Wikipedia that are more accessible to general public. Um, and also in terms of the content, is providing much more depth, right? And so I asked to include the brief history. It also include some of the resources that you can, one of the books that you can read about flow. And it has introduced some of the characteristics we have seen. Um, and then I also asked to focus on the to distinguish flow and concentration, which to many people, these two concepts might be very similar, but it's kind of trying to distinguish that, um, and that is appropriate, and explain it that in a way that is appropriate to a psychology graduate student. So from these three very quick examples, I'm showing you this is because even though you can see that these three prompts have similarly asked for an explanation of the psychological theory, but because the way the prompt is constructed differently, you can see that even slight changes in the way the prompt is asked will significantly change the quality, the length of the output. And that is exactly the reason why we're here talking about this topic, is that why I want to introduce you to some of the techniques that you can apply when you're using your ChatGPT, when you're using your AI. How can you write your prompt better? to get more quality response. But before I talk more deeper into the techniques, I kind of want to just briefly chat about or discuss about how AI works or how AI responds to give you a working like kind of like a mental model of how it works. Because I imagine for some of us, AI current may seem sometimes like a black box that we just put our input, put our prompt in, and expect something out. But what we're really not understanding or seeing is what's happening inside the box. And I feel like that could be helpful for us to understand it a little bit. That way, it will also help us to understand why some technique works when we later introduce them. So I want to start off by saying that when I talk about AI here, and also when a lot of us think about AI, we're probably thinking about a specific type of AI that is called the large language models or LLMs. You might have seen this term somewhere else. Just very briefly, LLMs, the way LLM works is that it predicts the next most likely word. That's it, right? So for example, you can see the example here. So if the AI system sees these three words, the Christmas is, and what it will try to do is to predict what word will come after this like short phrase. So maybe you think it's likely that the Christmas is on December 25th. That is a very plausible answer. Or the Christmas is coming, or the Christmas is here, which is a song. Christmas is coming soon, which is another song. So the AI was trying to predict what's likely going to come after every prompt you provide. And the second point here is that AI, the output is optimized for plausibility, not necessarily the truth. And because AI has absorbed patterns from a large amount of text, so when it responds, it's not retrieving facts from a certain database, but it's kind of generating a statistically plausible answer. And what does that mean? Using the same example here. So when the AI sees the Christmas is, it's going to generate some probability of what's going to come next. So here, maybe it thinks, I'm just putting up some numbers, 50% of chance that it thinks that it should be followed by on December 25th. And maybe 25% chance is it thinks that the Christmas is coming, and where 10% it thinks it should be here, that's after the sentence, or 15% is coming soon. So it's kind of like it's just assigning a different probability of what's going to come next. But that probability is not the same as human reasoning, right? It does not work the same way. It does not do reasoning like a human because it's optimized for plausibility. And that's the tricky part of the AI, is that it will try to make this answer more coherent, more fluent to maximize the plausibility, to make it seem like it's true. But it's not necessarily optimized for accuracy. There is no internal fact-checking mechanics inside AI unless it's explicitly prompted, right? It does not independently verify claims in real time. If you ask for citations, it may generate some text that looks like a citation, but because it knows what the citation should look like, but it does not guarantee that the citation is 100% accurate. And sometimes when AI appears to reason, it is also what we're seeing is a pattern of reasoning like language that it has learned from this database. But the structure of the reasoning does not mean that it is actually reasoning. It's still doing the most probable answer, generating the most plausible response. And the last point here is AI response is highly sensitive to framing and context, right? This is because AI models is prediction based. It is extremely sensitive to how we frame the question. If you change the context even slightly, the probability distribution of the next words can change dramatically. That's why even a very small prompt change can produce a large output difference. So think about, let's try to now imagine using the same example, the Christmas is, but imagine that you have been in a conversation with AI that has been talking about art, music, songs. And given that context, the probability of these last two options, which is all about name of the songs, suddenly becomes more probable. The likelihood of them being the answer is higher if the context changes. So that is a way to show this example to show how sensitive is context and framing to the response you get from AI. And I saw an interesting analogy here that maybe some of us can relate is prompting as experimenting. So as graduate student, I'm sure we're all somewhat familiar with experimental design in that we have an independent variable that we can manipulate, and we have a dependent variable that we can observe. And that is similar to how AI works, right? How AI prompting works is that you can manipulate your AI prompts, and the manipulation of that is going to result directly in the output, in the quality, in the length, in the format of the output. Just like how if you manipulate your independent variable and you're going to expect some changes in your dependent variable. But what is also really similar is that we all know how important it is. We have to be really careful of how we manipulate our independent variable during an experiment, because even a slight change in our IV could result in very unexpected change in our DV. And as the same applies for prompting AI here, is that even a small change in how we write our prompt can result in a large shift in the output. And so far we have in this webinar talked about why prompting is important and kind of get a brief introduction of how AI works. And now on the shift to talk about some the techniques that we can apply. I'm going to show you these techniques, and then you can take away from those and apply it when you're using AI on your own. And just on the top level, when I introduce the different techniques, I'm going to start with some explanation of how it works and why it works. And then I'm going to try to follow every technique with some examples of what does it look like to apply these techniques in prompting, so that you can kind of get a quick sense of what it looks like and how you can apply it. So I'm going to try to do that with every technique I'll be talking about. So the first technique here is simply be more specific, right? We're trying to avoid generic prompts. So what does a generic prompt look like? Think about the example I showed you in the beginning, explain flow theory. That is a very generic prompt. Because generic prompts, they leave a lot of ambiguity, which will lead to also generic responses. But sometimes I realize that, trying to be more specific is more easily said than done. Because sometimes when we sit down on our own, when we think about the prompt, we just don't have a clear idea of how we can make it more specific. So here, I try to make the process easier by giving you kind of this framework that you can try and apply in your own time. Okay, so this framework specifically just specify 4 elements that can make your prompt more specific. So we start with an action, and then followed by the scope of this action. then adding a constraint length or constraint of this action, and finally topping with the focus of this action. So what does it look like, right? So let's see the first example here. I'm gonna read it first. You can ignore the words in the bracket, just focus on the prompt. So critique this abstract in 200 words, focusing on clarity. So now I'm gonna break it down. So we can see that first of all, this prompt started with an action term, critique. And then critique what? The scope, this abstract. And then what is the length or constraint of this action? Critique in 200 words. And then finally, what is the focus of this action? Focus on the clarity of the writing or the abstract. So you can see how these four different elements can work together to make your prompt more specific. And so the second example here, similarly, provide an analysis of the French Revolution in 250 words, emphasizing economic causes. So again, it started with an action term, provide, and followed by the scope and analysis of the French Revolution, and then followed by the length of constraint in 250 words, or you can say maybe like in 3 to 4 paragraphs or in 5 bullet points. And then finally, what do you want to focus on, right? So I wanted to emphasizing the economic causes. So this framework, action plus scope plus length, constraint plus focus, this is something that you can take away or write it down now, and you can try to apply it next time you write an AI prompt. That way, it is a more systematic way to help us to write prompts that are more specific. So the second technique I want to introduce you today is define audience and format. So it is really important for us to think about the question, who is this prompt for, or will be the response used for, right? Because if we take a moment to reflect back on the examples we saw at the beginning of the webinar, when I asked ChatGPT to explain this flow theory to high school student or to graduate psychology student, you can see that the response looks very different. Defining the audience changes the vocabulary of the output, which directly influence the quality of the output. And in addition, you can also specify which format do you want your output to be. So you can either say, I want my output in bullet points, or can you provide a table, structured outlines, or simply in different paragraphs. So some examples applying this technique, right? So explain supply and demand to high school students, or explain supply and demand to policymakers, including implications for price controls. So you can expect with the first prompt, it explains supply and demand to high school students, you can expect the prompts to be more using more generic language that is understandable to high school students. Maybe you also try to be more educational because as the audience will be students. Whereas for the second prompt to policymakers, you may expect more technical terms and maybe more actionable terms, since it's influencing it's a message to policymakers. So you can see how by defining the audience, you're gonna get different quality and different output from your response. And then the last example here, summarize utilitarianism in 5 bullet points, including one major criticism. So this is one example that you can ask AI to generate a response in a specific output or format you want. So here is saying, I want the summarize in 5 bullet points. You can also ask in a table or in a structured outline. And that way you can expect the response to be generated in a certain in a desired format. Now, the next technique I'm going to show you is called illicit reasoning. And this is something that I learned early on when I'm interacting with AI, right? So AI operates on many assumptions. And so whenever we give a prompt to AI will always try to assume certain things in order for us to answer the question. Um, so but we know that some of the assumptions may be correct, but it's unavoidable some of the assumptions AI might get wrong the first time. And that might be the reason sometimes our response is not the response that we like, or it's not the quality we expect. It's because AI has made some inaccurate assumptions about what the user is trying to ask. So you can combat this issue by asking AI to make its logic more explicit. And some of the reasoning AI models already do that. If you're not familiar with what reasoning AI models is some of those models that when you ask the question, it it doesn't give you the answer right away, but instead it will give you some of the reasoning process behind it. So for example, if you ask a question, then the first thing you're gonna see is, okay, AI try to okay, the user asked me this question and I'm trying to guess what the user's trying to do here. Okay, maybe user think about this, or the users think about that. Let me try to think about that. So that is kind of mimics the reasoning process of the AI models. And that reasoning process is important because if we see a response that is not what we want or we don't really like, then that reasoning process is useful if we want to try to debug the response. Try to see where it went wrong in terms of the thinking process. Maybe it has made an incorrect assumptions and that changes the whole output. And maybe it's wrongly assumes you're asking for X when you're really thinking about asking for Z, right? So um, some of the blurbs I have included here will help you to get some of the assumptions more explicit for you to check, right? So you can, and these blurbs works for any prompts, right? With any prompts you ask AI, you can always add this blurb following. So you can, for example, you can ask AI to identify its assumption more explicitly so that it will list out all the assumptions it make in order to answer your prompt. You can ask AI to present competing interpretations. You can ask AI to ask me for clarifying questions before responding. And this is something that I use a lot personally, right? So I write my prompt and I ask and I add this blurb at the end. And so instead of giving me the response right away, it will ask me some questions first. Okay, do you want this, or who is this for? How long do you want it? Or do you mean this or that? And this is really helpful because sometimes when we're asking our questions, we may not always know what assumptions we hold because some of the assumptions may be very implicit. We may not be able to articulate everything we want. So sometimes getting AI to ask us those questions can help us better to reflect, okay, what I really want here. And also it helps AI to better understand what is it that you really want. That way you can get a response that's more tailored to your need. And the next technique I want to talk about today is iterate. When we're using AI, we should always kind of expect or have this expectation that the first output is rarely perfect. That is always going to be an iterative process for us to get output that we want. Right? So we can revise for clarity, for rigor, for tone, You can ask AI for a deeper critique. And one of the interesting analogy I see people use is people kind of sort of treat AI as their personal research assistant, right? They're always very helpful. They're very determined to help you solve a certain problem. But the problem is that they will need you, the expert, to provide some guidance. Because if you don't, then the AI or the research assistant can simply just drift away from where you want it to be. Um, right? So it's always requiring you to provide some of the feedback through that iteration. And and this technique can work with other techniques in conjunction, right? So you may try some of the techniques that we have talked about previously, but you may realize, oh, it's still not getting a level that I really want. So it's requiring that iteration, right? To revise, to see where it went wrong, and then to um, um, to ask AI to revise it and make it better. And finally, the last technique I want to show you today is called role prompting, right? So this is a powerful idea that people have been using AI for since when it first came up, because they can ask AI to act in a certain way or to act as a certain persona. So imagine AI can be your personal reviewers for your article, can be your policy analyst, could be a personal instructor, etc., etc. And using this role framing, it significantly shifts the depth and focus of the response. So it can expect a completely different response in terms of lens and focus when you're asking AI to be a college professor versus maybe a policy analyst, even to the same problem. So some of the blurbs or examples you can use is respond as a policy analyst, for example, act as a skeptical reviewer for this writing, explain as a college professor that explain to me this concept. And here I'm going to also show you some resources I found that so there has been a lot of articles, books written about role prompting. And here I'll just show you one resources. Um, let me try to, here. So this is an article written by Dr. Ethan Malik. He is very influential, has been writing about AI, um, one of the early writers. And this article give you some practical tools or prompts that you can use to for role prompting, right? So here is the content of this article, and you can see that there are different sections: AI as mentor, AI as tutor, AI as coach, AI as teammate, AI as student, AI as simulator. So for example, if we go to AI as tutor, it has a subsection that has example prompt. Go there, and you can see that these two paragraphs are prompts that are ready for you to copy and paste into your own AI, and that will prompt your AI to act as your personal AI tutor. So, and you can see that it has different roles as well. And here's another resource from is a GitHub project that is similar that is organize the different prompts in different files. So here you can see on the left-hand side, there are different files in different folders. And here, if you click the tutor file, you can see that the same prompt we had just seen in the article also shows up here. This is some prompt you can easily copy and make your AI. You can also see what model it supports. So you can put this prompt into your AI model, and it will turn that AI into a personal tutor. It also has prompts for team members, um, peer teaching, and this is for students. So there's also a folder for educators where you can use AI to become an instructional coach for your students, um, um, or use it as a diagnostic quiz generator. All these different rules, right? I want to just quickly show you that, and I will put these links, put these two links in the chat as well, so that you can check it out if you like. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so now we have seen the different, well, now we have introduced the different techniques. I just want to kind of get everything together. What does it mean, right, by showing you these three examples. So I'm going to show you three weak prompts that uh, and I'm going to show you how we can make this weak prompt stronger by applying some of the techniques we have discussed today. Right, so okay, the first prompt, critique my argument. It's how we can make it stronger. We can make it stronger by saying, critique this following argument as if you were reviewing it for a peer-reviewed psychology journal. Identify methodological weaknesses, unsupported assumptions, and alternative interpretations. So right away, you can see that it is using some role prompting technique to ask AI to act as a reviewer for a certain psychology journal, right? It's providing the direction for where to review the argument for is for methodological weaknesses, unsupported assumptions, alternative interpretations. So by applying this technique, we kind of make this prompt stronger by providing using that role prompting, providing more specific details where we wanted to focus on. A second example, you may want to ask AI to explain the concept of regression, or how we can make it stronger. Explain multiple regression to first-year PhD students in economy who understand correlation but not matrix algebra. Use a concrete research example. So here we're applying techniques by specifying who is it for, right? Who is the audience? The audience here is first-year PhD students in economy, and is also providing some more framing and context to the audience. They understand correlation, but they do not understand the matrix algebra. So you may expect that in its response, it try to be more specific, be more thorough on explaining how matrix algebra and how does that influence their understanding of this concept. And finally, it has also asked a concrete research example to better help with understanding. And because of the context of students in economy, you may expect that AI will try to generate a research example that is easily relatable to economy students. And the last example here, weak prompt provided an overview of the theory. How can we make it better? Provide a structured overview of the theory for a graduate seminar. Include core constructs, key empirical findings, major criticism, and two unresolved research questions. Again, is applying some defining your audience techniques. Okay, this overview is for a graduate seminar, so you can expect it to maybe use more academic language, and also is specifying it to include these four different elements: core construct, key empirical findings, major criticism, and two unresolved research question that can readily be used for a graduate seminar. So I hope that by seeing these three examples, it kind of makes more sense how you can transform some of the prompts and make it stronger by providing more details, defining your audience, trying some of the more techniques, And remember, it can be an iterative process. So some of the prompts may not be perfect, right? So and we can make it better by revise them by using that iterative process to make it more specific by providing more context by clarifying more clearly what you need. So in summary, here are the five techniques we have talked about today. And I just want to also give you like a here is as what I think as maybe it works as a checklist you can use on your own. So the group prompt should always include defined audience, clear specific task, explicit context and constraints, and structured format. And so this is something that you can always examine your own prompt. Does it meet some of the criteria? And if not, how can you try to add it in um, to make it more comprehensive? And now, with the time left, I would like for everyone to engage in this letter exercise that so what I want you to do maybe in the next 5 to 10 minutes is first of all, find an AI prompt that you have recently used and then try to improve the prompt by applying some of the prompting techniques we have discussed today. And at the end, if you like, you can share the result either in the chat or you can unmute yourself and share it with the group. So yeah, that if everybody is clear with what we're trying to do, I'll go back to the slides previously in case you need a reference to the techniques. So again, find the prompt you have recently used and try to apply some of the techniques we have used that is listed here. So I'll say everybody, give everybody 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and see if people have something to share. Okay, I see already. Martha has shared some of the results in the chat. Um, Martha, would you also be uh, willing to share what prompt you have used to generate that output? Um,
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know why it won't through my phone. So the last portion that I submitted was the question that I asked ChatGPT. And so I know you had mentioned to craft it, for an audience, and I asked for
sorry, Martha is kind of cutting out your like I can hear some part of it, but the other part I couldn't really hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just framed the question for net zero to explain to an environmental science university class.
Mm-hmm.
And I just made it very simple just to see what the response would be to explain net zero to an environmental science university class.
Mm-hmm.
And it just took me down a lot of loops. But ultimately, it gave me an option for environmental justice and policy work. And what I posted is what it recommended if I wanted that to be answered for me.
I see. Yeah. And that is something you will like you want yourself, right? If I understand it correctly. That is something you're looking
Yes.
for. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. You can absolutely like yeah, try also you can also try like um I think that it elicit more reasoning, right? You can ask ChatGPT to kind of guess what you're trying to ask, what you're really looking for, and they can list out several things, and they can check, okay, so like I want this or that for my class, and then yeah, using applying some of that search technique there can be really helpful. Thank you for sharing.
Can you mute me again so you don't hear my noise? Thank you.
Uh, okay, we have more people sharing in the chat. Um, okay, we have Samuel that um, seems did three prompt. Prompt one, identify technology adoption models, and then prompt two, iterative prompt of above, and then a prompt three, um, a, a skeptic's view. Um, do you want to explain a little bit of what you did there, Samuel?
Sure. Yeah. So this is something that I've been actually having a multi-month discussion with ChatGPT on, and I really appreciated some tuning on this today. This has really helped a lot in pulling a lot of the things that you've mentioned today into this. And really what I've been trying to get my arms around is as I prepare to do research is, what are some of the models that I could apply towards kind of consumer acceptance of, AI in healthcare settings. And I'm struggling with like, okay, what model do I apply? And so this provided me a really nice, pretty quick read of, what all of the different models I should be thinking about are. And definitely got some more when I asked it to iterate. I probably should have asked it to iterate a few more times. And then finally, and this just kind of came up in the when you were talking about this today, I think you used as an example. Uh, Having a skeptic viewpoint on it really was just in the few minutes I've looked at it, it was very insightful on oh, there are some flaws with this model that I could, poke at with my research or hope to fill in the blanks. So yeah, very helpful on this. Appreciate
Yeah,
the honor today, Harry.
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that just reminds me of something that um, I think most AI models by default they're trying to be like nice models. Like they're not trying. So when you ask for feedback, it is good, and I think most of the time it tends to answer that it looks good. It's great. But not because it doesn't see some of the issues, but it's because the way model works. So by asking it, you can critique this or being skeptical um, to act in a certain way can elicit some of that come back some of that like mechanics I would call of it trying to be like overly nice and trying because sometimes that is not the reason we use it for, right? We wanted to make our things better, but not to get just compliments. All right. Um, so I see we're at 2:55. There's some more examples that people shared in the chat. Thank you for everyone who shared. I want to leave it for some time for questions if people have for the last 5 minutes. Um, but otherwise, thank you all for joining and sharing and engaging in this conversation. And I hope that you have learned something useful and like that you can apply. And yeah, so thank you everybody. And if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute or type in the chat.